Episode 60, titled Governance, Privacy, and Quality Controls Fast Recall, the focus is a rapid memory pass on the controls that keep data work safe, credible, and decision-ready. The point of spaced review is not to reteach every detail, but to bring the most testable and most operational ideas back to the front of the mind quickly. Governance, privacy, and quality controls tend to fail in quiet ways. So recall practice is really practice at noticing small warning signs before they become visible failures. A good recall session also builds a common language, which reduces confusion when teams need to move fast under audit pressure, incident pressure, or executive time pressure. Governance foundations start with three ideas that anchor almost every control conversation: metadata, lineage, and a source of truth. Metadata is the descriptive layer that tells a human what a field means, what its type is, what values are allowed, and what time window it represents, so columns do not become guesswork. Lineage is the path the data traveled from source to report, including transformations, joins, filters, and aggregation steps, which is how teams explain why a number looks the way it does. A source of truth is the chosen authoritative reference for a metric or dataset, which reduces conflicting numbers by giving the organization one baseline unless explicitly stated otherwise. Documentation artifacts exist to prevent the most common failures of shared understanding, especially when teams grow and reuse increases. A data dictionary prevents misinterpretation of fields by capturing meaning, type, units, and rules in a compact way that travels with the dataset. Flow diagrams prevent mystery pipelines by showing how data moves, where transformations happen, and where handoffs occur between teams or systems. Explainability reports prevent overtrust and undertrust by describing in plain language why a result looks the way it does, what inputs drive it, and what limitations matter when a decision is made quickly. Versioning and traceability habits are the trust builders that keep reporting reproducible when systems and definitions evolve. A version is a labeled state of data or code, captured so outputs can point to exactly what they were built from rather than relying on vague timing. Snapshots preserve a stable historical truth at a point in time, which is essential for close processes, audit evidence, and calm comparison across periods. Traceability connects a number back to sources and logic steps, making it possible to explain shifts as controlled change rather than as suspicious inconsistency. When version markers are consistently visible or recorded, teams spend less time arguing about whose report is right and more time deciding what to do. Retention, replication, and deletion are responsibilities, not abstract policy words, because they describe where data persists and how long risk remains present. Retention is how long data stays stored, including secondary copies like exports, caches, and backups that often outlive the primary record by accident. Replication is the creation of copies for resilience and availability, which improves uptime while also multiplying the number of places where sensitive data exists. Deletion is only a real control when it is documented, executed, and verified, because we intend to delete does not reduce exposure if jobs fail silently or replicas are missed. Clear ownership and visible evidence are what turn these lifecycle choices into accountable practice. Privacy concepts can be held at a high level without making legal claims by focusing on purpose, minimization, and controlled handling of personal data. Personal data includes information tied to an individual directly or indirectly, which is why identifiers, persistent IDs, and linkable attributes deserve careful treatment even when they look technical. Jurisdiction risk appears when teams cannot confidently state where data resides, where it replicates, and who can access it across regions and environments because location and access pathways shape which rules may apply. Under frameworks like GDPR, the practical operational posture centers on clear purpose, restrained collection, rights-aware workflows, and traceable handling rather than improvisation under deadline pressure. Audit readiness is built from evidence types that show controls operate consistently, not just that controls exist on paper. Useful evidence includes access review records, logs that show who accessed what and when, change approvals that show review happened, and configuration baselines that show controls are in place. Incident tickets, investigation notes, and post-incident records matter because auditors evaluate response discipline as part of risk management maturity. Exception records matter because exceptions are normal, but only defensible when they are approved, time-bounded when possible, and revisited instead of forgotten. The evidence story becomes stronger when it is organized and time-stamped, because timing and consistency are how credibility is assessed. Access control and encryption controls can be recalled as layered protections that reduce exposure even when one layer is imperfect. Role-based access control, RBAC, ties permissions to job responsibilities, so access is predictable, reviewable, and less dependent on personal judgment. Least privilege keeps roles from expanding into broad, just-in-case access, which is how sensitive fields end up visible to audiences that never needed them. Encryption in transit protects data as it moves across networks, while encryption at rest protects stored copies and backups, which reduces harm when storage is exposed or mishandled. Key management is the hidden hinge, because weak key custody can undermine otherwise strong encryption, so ownership, rotation, and access limitation around keys matter. Masking and anonymization are often confused, so recall works best when the difference is described in terms of risk rather than terminology. Masking hides sensitive parts of a value while preserving limited utility, such as partial identifiers for reconciliation, which reduces exposure without claiming the person cannot be identified. Anonymization aims to remove identifiability, but it is difficult to guarantee because re-identification can occur through combinations of attributes and external context. Many datasets described as anonymous are more accurately treated as de-identified, meaning risk is reduced but not eliminated, especially in small populations or rich datasets. Aggregation often provides a safer sharing path because trends and rates can be shared without exposing individual records at all. Quality assurance recall becomes simpler when it is tied to the idea that quality is measurable behavior, not a feeling. Tests validate ranges, types, and relationships so obvious failures like impossible values, broken formats, or referential gaps are caught early. Source control tracks changes to logic and code so teams can trace when a metric changed, why it changed, and how to roll back if a change breaks outputs. User acceptance testing, UAT, confirms that outputs match stakeholder expectations, including interpretation, time windows, labels, and drill behavior. Requirement validation ensures the dataset answers the right question, because a precisely computed answer is still wrong if the scope, definition, or purpose was misunderstood. Monitoring recall can be anchored on profiling and drift because many failures are silent until a pattern changes. Profiling establishes what normal looks like for distributions, row counts, null rates, and category mixes, which gives monitoring a baseline that reflects real variability. Drift detection watches for pattern shifts over time, distinguishing legitimate business change from upstream logging changes, schema drift, or partial loads that distort trends. Automated checks surface these issues without manual hunting, but thresholds must be tuned to avoid alert fatigue that trains teams to ignore signals. ISO thinking is useful as a process mindset here, emphasizing consistent routines and evidence trails, so monitoring is provable, repeatable, and maintained as systems evolve. A 2-minute summary practice works best when it treats governance, privacy, and quality as 3 short stories with the same structure. The governance story explains how meaning is made findable through metadata, lineage, and a source of truth, so numbers are consistent and explainable across teams. The privacy story explains how purpose, minimization, retention discipline, and controlled sharing reduce exposure without blocking legitimate analytics work. The quality story explains how tests, source control, UAT, and monitoring catch problems early and prevent quiet errors from spreading into executive decisions. Each story becomes stronger when it ends with one concrete evidence artifact, such as a dictionary entry, an access review record, or a freshness and drift metric history. A rapid recall session also benefits from naming weak points plainly, because weakness is often about habit gaps rather than knowledge gaps. 3 common weak points are unclear metric definitions that allow 2 teams to compute the same number differently, untracked replicas and exports that quietly extend retention and exposure, and missing drift baselines that make slow degradation invisible until stakeholders notice. These weak points tend to appear together because unclear definitions increase ad hoc copies, and ad hoc copies make monitoring harder when versions diverge. When weakness is named in concrete terms, it becomes easier to attach it to a control habit rather than treating it as a vague organizational problem. The close of the recall session can be framed as choosing a 5-minute focus for tomorrow that reinforces the highest risk habit gap in the current environment. One focus might be traceability, using version markers and a short lineage explanation so metric shifts can be explained without drama. Another focus might be privacy intake, adding a quick purpose and residency check so sharing and retention decisions start with constraints rather than after-the-fact cleanup. A third focus might be quality monitoring, establishing one profiling baseline and one drift alert so silent failures have a visible early warning. The most valuable focus is the one that produces a small, repeatable artifact that makes tomorrow's decisions safer than today's. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.